Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first and hopefully not last Hypeimmune Reviews, where hype comes to die. You can call me School Writer, and we are going to talk about Creature Commandos. Honestly, I was planning on watching this series later, but algorithms do as algorithms do, and spoilers started popping up on my newsfeeds, so I decided to just cut to the chase. I'm familiar with the brunt of the DC universe, even if I'm not particularly a fan, and while I was honestly fed up with anything related to the Suicide Squad, and if I ever see Harley Quinn or Joker or Amanda Waller in 250 years, it will be too soon. I enjoyed James Gunn's work so far, and I did enjoy his spin on the Suicide Squad, so I gave it a chance. How did it fare? Let's find out. Written and directed by James Gunn, who also made Guardians of the Galaxy, The Suicide Squad and so on, Creature Commandos is an animated series set within the DC universe and has a broad strokes continuation of the movie The Suicide Squad and the series Pacemaker. The country of Wakalistan is in danger. A militia made of incels led by the sorceress Cersei, voiced by Anya Chalotra, is invading the country with the intent of killing Princess Ilana Rostovich, voiced by Maria Balakova, and establishing Cersei as its ruler. But since Wakalistan is in talks with the government of the United States about sharing the natural resources, including untapped oil reserves, Amanda Waller, voiced by Viola Davis, decides once more to send a Black Ops team to solve the situation, since it involved metahumans. Due to the events happening in Peacemaker, she cannot use human inmates anymore for the Task Force X, but a loophole doesn't prevent her from using non-humans. Thus, she gives her agent Rick Flag Sir, voiced by Frank Grillo, the leadership of a group of monsters, the Creature Commandos. This team is composed by The Bride, voiced by Indira Varma, a woman created the same way as the Frankenstein monster, G.I. Robot, voiced by Sean Gunn, a robot made to kill Nazis, the Weasel, also voiced by Sean Gunn, who is an unknown creature that survived the events of the Suicide Squad, Dr. Phosphorus, voiced by Alan Tudyk, a man basically made of nuclear fire, and Nina Mazursky, voiced by Zoe Chow, a fish-human hybrid with superintelligence. But not everything is what it seems, and things will be far more gruesome than expected, especially since the Frankenstein monster, voiced by David Harbour, soon realized that his bride showed up once more and is after her, and Cersei has ulterior motives. When I first watched the series, I realized that there was something amiss. Normally, the Warner Bros. Animation studio uses a style that feels like a hybrid of the Avatar series with the early Bruce Timm shows such as Batman animated series and so on. This meant simplify the facial lines with focus on the eyes and lips, but no variation to the point where characters' model blurs together, with a muted and dark palette, even during the day, getting weirdly and dangerous close of the animation style of Marvel animated series. But here the dark lines are thicker to the point it reminds me of Hellboy. Every face is nearly completely different from the other, colors are brighter with a more varied palette, there are brushes of anime in the characters' designs, not enough to say it's inspired by, but enough to feel that there is a honorable mention, like Rick Flag's hair. Turns out it's because this series was animated by Bobby Pills, a French studio, and I love how the French have no damns to give. I've known their works from the absolutely atrocious Captain Laserhawk series, and I'm happy that this time their animation is under a much better directing and a better script. As said before, their style is different, here focusing on stark contrasts, be it color, line or physique. And after several movies with characters with identical models, this is a very welcome change. Said contrast seems to be inspired by pulp magazines, with character models evoking several different sources, be them Western or Eastern. For example, Frankenstein pulls both from his DC Comics incarnation, and I may be wrong, but he takes several cues from Victor from Darkstalkers. And it is literally impossible to look at Dr. Phosphorus and not think of Blight from Batman Beyond. Background sets are varied, both in style and color, with palatial backgrounds contrasting very well with European slums, which also contrast with North American neighborhoods, showing that the artists took care with the backgrounds. I wouldn't say that I liked or disliked the designs or the scenarios, except in the case of G.I. Robot, but again I'm a sucker for diesel punk. As a director, Gunn is still quite competent. Since he likes character-driven stories, expect lots of face-zoom shots or shots where only one person is talking. There are dialogues and group shots, but he prefers to switch between who is talking instead of pan over multiple people. Said shots last long enough, so he avoids the overly short shots, which are the bane of my existence, like a plague. There are good pans to show where the action is taking place, exposition shots and so on, but nothing as good as Don't Bluff in Titan AE. I'll still review that movie one day. But Gunn, being a specialist in flashback, truly shines while doing those. Really good transitions, music matching the scene, good pacing and so on. So right after the gate we have something far better than the previous animated Suicide Squad movies, but that's a low bar to surpass. Bobby Pills is a studio that is clearly inspired by anime, and they know how to animate a good fight scene. Combined with Gunn's directing, the results are pretty good. Action is fluid, bombastic and brutal, but thankfully Gunn's directing prevents things from getting over-the-top gory, to the point it just turns bland, a sin that both Laserhawk and the previous Suicide Squad animated movies commit in spades. Action is varied in style to not let getting things stale. Gunfights, superpowered brawls with people of several different degrees of super strength and resilience duking it out, and more. What's worth of note is that they use the powers of the team, especially Dr. Phosphorus, quite creatively. Nearly every single fight we have a music as a background, but that's for the soundtrack. If I had to point out a flaw, it's that it's sometimes, and only sometimes, the shots get a bit too quick and still use a shake cam, but that's a personal opinion. And even then it's not on a level that really bothers me. You can still see quite clearly what's happening, with focus on who shows up and what they are going to do, and a dynamic camera that follows the action accordingly. The animation itself is a bit stiff, but again, this is just a matter of personal opinion. As mentioned, Gunn is a director and a writer focused on characterization. He fleshes out characters and through them delivers the narrative. So more often than not, the narrative is secondary to the characters themselves. His preferred method of character-driven narratives are often paired with plenty of flashbacks and sad moments. He really likes to crank up the sadness in order to make empathetic characters, even the villains. Thus, most of the story is actually a background for him to expose each one of the members of the creature Commandos, and through said exposition, give more than criticism. And James Gunn doesn't hold back. Right from the start, we see open scathing talks about USA foreign policies regarding allies as nothing more than cheap sources of riches and inhumane use of citizens in black ops. The team is assembled under the command of Rick Flag in order to fight Cersei, and in the middle of the way the Frankenstein monster shows up seeking the bride. But most of each chapter will be devoted towards the main characters, and by most of each chapter I mean literally half of it if not more. On the bright side, where it works, mostly. Each character has a backstory that highlights societal problems and offers hard questions to ponder, and they range from subtle, like GI's backstory being a good, subtle way of showing how war veterans are treated by their nation after the war is over and the rise of modern fascism, to absolutely ham-fisted, like Nina being a constant target of abuse. And where many other series would fall to the trap on only showing mankind as a bunch of irredeemable jerkasses for the sake of edginess, here both the worst and the best of mankind are properly highlighted. The problems start on how every single member of the creature commandos is a victim, which makes things a bit predictable and also robs interesting opportunities for characters to grow as people and get some kindness due to camaraderie and reflect on their past actions. Characterization-wise, we have a mixed bag. Some characters and interactions are good, for example Rick Flag's son, unable to deny the call to arms because he genuinely thinks he is making some good, even if his son died doing the same thing. And I don't know if he knows that his son died due to Amanda Waller's orders. Nina and the bride's friendship are the usual cliché good-hearted naive girl and grumpy jaded jerk with a heart of gold. It was done far too often nowadays, but some may still find it amusing. G.I. Robot and Dr. Phosphorus were interesting on their own right, as someone who takes joy in simple things and another who cannot properly express himself outside of violence. On the other hand, even if I hate the character, I have to say that Amanda Waller was turned into an overreactive moron to make the plot go on, and those who are familiar with Frankenstein from DC will be disappointed to see that the intelligent warrior that fights for mankind while knowing that he will never be long is reduced to a humbling, bumbling, childish stalker jerkass who callously kills people in his quest to find and marry the bride. It's closer to his book interpretation. I understand it was needed to make the bride work in the series, and I have to admit that some of his interactions are funny, but I honestly don't like when characters are twisted and diminished like that. Fans of Wonder Woman and her villains will find that Cersei is absolutely nerfed here as well. The other big problem is that, since everything is character driven and there are lots and lots of characters to go through, there is barely any time for the story itself to breathe. Every single member of the Creature Commandos gets a long expository flashback, and some could easily be cut in half without losing much. And when we push past the character's exposition, we find a story that the more you pay attention to it, the worse it gets. Even more troublesome, many plot holes start to appear and less sense it makes. Everything feels as if it's just an excuse to highlight the members of the Creature Commandos. If so, why not just make an anthology series then? The Commandos themselves barely interact with each other outside of Nina and the bride, and they don't coordinate tactics, they don't develop, several subplots have little to no relevance, and you could easily axe both Frankenstein and the Weasel from the story, keeping the Frankenstein in Bride's flashbacks, and you'd lose literally nothing, which in the case of such short series, this means a lot. The ending feels rushed, with the explanation to what was going on feels stacked, and well, the ending confrontations end up lackluster. There's no climatic battle, no big bang, everything's resolved with information supposedly given off screen and just one or two whacks. So the plot itself is really needed some time in the oven. But even then, I can clearly see why, even with all the holes and problems, this story was well received. It avoids very well the common bumps and problems from the predecessors. The writing cuts to the chase and exposes everything that's going on without any fuss. You don't have to watch previous movies or previous series to understand what's going on or who those people are, and while there is violence and sex, those are toned down to bearable level, only show when it's relevant to order to give impact to a scene, or in case of sex have a funny moment with repercussions, so it dodges the excesses. In the end, while I don't think that it's the best thing since sliced bread, I do agree this was enjoyable, and several levels above the previous iterations. I hope that its shortcomings were due to demands of the producers, because it definitely needed more time to cook and flesh out the story and the characters themselves. If this was Gunn's hands-free idea, he maybe needed people to check what he's writing, lest he becomes another George Lucas. If I had my reservations about the plot and characters, the soundtrack absolutely goes smoothly without a hitch. To me, this is the best part of the series by a long shot. At first, I thought the score has been chosen by Trent Reznor, since it follows a similar style of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem movie, of a completely dissonant soundtrack, but turns out it was Gunn himself who chose the music. For those who don't know, dissonant soundtracks where you choose the least possible fitting music to a scene, but the degree of dissonance is such that it does a 180 and turns out to be fitting for the situation. This is already a hard job, but Gunn went above and beyond and basically chose a hell of a set of songs not only to fit the scenes in theme and lyrics, but also to elevate said scenes to new levels. For example, everyone saw the fight between Flag and Phosphorus with Malavida by Gogol Bordello playing in the background. It's two supposed allies fighting in an Eastern Europe castle, but the music is energetic and sung in Spanish. It was so absurd and unfitting that it ends perfectly for the scene, and I'm happy to say that this style extends to the whole series. In fact, Gogol Bordello plays most of the songs of the series, but there are also bangers with several other bands. Really, really good. In the voice acting department, there are absolutely no complaints for me. Everyone was quite fitting to their characters, though special mention goes to David Harbour as Frankenstein. I didn't like how the character was written, but Harbour surprised me, keeping the tone of the voice variable between an eager idiot, a dangerous stalker, and a psychotic man-child. In the end, my final thoughts are, yeah, I would recommend it. While not as good as everyone says and quite flawed, it's still an interesting series on its own right. It delivers several poignant criticisms without going overboard. James Gunn still delivers nice fleshed out characters, even if not all of them are hits, and the soundtrack and action scenes are really, really good. Well, this was it. Thank you very much for everyone who listened, and see you all next week, hopefully. For the spoiler sections, everyone okay with me going on? Alright, let's do it. So, the main problem that drives the series is that Cersei had a vision into the future that the princess would end up conquering the world, and decided to stop it. The first red flag is that in order to make Cersei and the armed militia of incels a credible threat, they go through an army of people with power armor. Yes, power armor. They go through them like butter. This would be a minor nuisance if not for the fact that Cersei gives Amanda Waller the same vision she had from the future, and said vision is given credit by a specialist on Themyscira, including Amazons and Cersei. Sure, fine and dandy, but Amanda immediately jumps from I have dubbed to I must kill the princess. Again, I hate Amanda Waller, mostly because from a credible grey area antagonist from the GLA cartoon, she was cranked up to unbearable levels of being a bitch that shows everywhere. But nonetheless, she's often depicted as a person that thinks first and acts later, said action being of a dubious moral angle. Amanda would normally pick up the vision she had, put the pieces together, and then plot a course of action. Here she just jumps to let's murder everyone, international relations be damned. And now we come to full circle. The Apocolistan army, the same guys that were gunned down by incels with basic weapons and no training, are now supposed to be not only a credible threat to the creature commandos, but to the whole world. We are given no explanation on how the princess would be able to lead an army and be able to kill the entire Justice League, including Superman and Wonder Woman. There is a cameo of Gorilla Grodd in Cersei's vision, but even then that explains nothing. But turns out the vision was fake, or was it? Because the specialist in Themyscira was murdered by Clayface, who then disguises as her, then Clayface nearly murders Rick Flag and the Frankenstein monster, only being defeated by sheer luck. But wait, there's more! The finale shows that the princess was in fact evil, would in fact cause the Third World War and murder the Justice League. So she hired Clayface to murder and replace the specialist and act in a odd way to be caught and the whole projection to be seen as a false flag operation. But the bride sees through it and kills the princess anyway. We are never told how the princess learned of the prediction. Why nearly killing Rick Flag helps it in any way? How could the bride get the pieces of the puzzle and place them together? She didn't even know about the specialist or the prediction, and we don't see her talking to either Rick or Amanda Waller. We don't know how the blazes that poor nation would be able to get strong enough to tackle the whole world. And lastly, we don't know how the group escapes in the palace right after killing the princess right there. It just cuts to black. And then the bride has a new group whom she can be a demanding asshole to, end of story. And these are just the plot holes I bother to say. There are many more. You want an easy way to fix that? Just remove the dream, or make the princess hold an artifact that would bring the end of the world, which then would raise interesting questions about how the USA is policing everyone else, or even better, her contact with the bride inspire her to seek the Frankenstein research. Simple! Oh, and speaking of, basically the Frankenstein appears to the whole series, has his own episode on how he's a psycho stalker with a crush, and when he finally meets the bride, he gets shot 3 times and is down for the count. Only showing up in the post-credits. No big confrontation, no high emotions, nothing. A huge letdown that cements that his appearance could be removed with no problems whatsoever. Though I have to admit that I liked how the writing dodged the overused "we made our own time loop" trap, where the Waller's intervention would create the very same threat she wanted to stop. Here it's straightforward. She finds a threat, she neutralizes it. And I find really funny, biting and interesting how lots of the problems of the creature Commandos come from how stupid, inept and corrupt the USA police is. And yeah, Dr. Phosphorus going through a tank? Really fucking awesome.